Okay guys, today is it. We are talking about the KTM 790. It's a bike I've had for 2 years now, and I want to talk to you about my impressions thus far. Right off the bat, I want to tell you that I am not a professional rider, and this is just my opinion. In this video, I'm also going to try to quickly go over some of the accessories that I've installed on the bike and my general impressions. Hopefully, if you're somebody that's interested in buying KTM 790, or you just want to look at some accessories that you might farkle your bike with, believe me, farkle is a word, but if you want to farkle your bike further, stick around. We have a playlist that we're building right now with all the accessories we've installed on the bike and our general impressions of each. I hope that the time that we've taken to talk about this helps you with your decision to either buy a KTM 790 or accessorize your bike more. So next month we've got an adventure ride. It's in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Tennessee and North Carolina. We're going to be spending a week out there riding, and it's going to be mixed dirt, gravel, probably hit the tail of the dragon. If you'd love to see that video, subscribe below. Should be out in the next month or so, right after we get home. Lastly, if you have an opinion on any of the things that I say in this video, please comment, because I do not pretend to be a professional in this. I'm just here to tell you what my particular opinion is, and I'd love to hear what yours is as well. Alright, so let's jump right into this review, talking about the bike from when I bought it. So I picked up the bike in March of 2020, which was right when COVID hit, if you remember. I'm sure you do. I had just been kind of furloughed from work and found the bike used in West Virginia. I was currently, at the time, I was in Ohio, so I took the trip over to West Virginia, picked up the bike. The bike had 430 miles on it, had a couple scratches. I talked to the owner, and essentially what it was that his dad bought him out on the bike because he was so terrified after seeing his son ride it that he was going to get himself hurt. Totally get that, and if you're thinking about buying a KTM 790, this is a real issue. Putting it in rally mode is no joke, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit in my learning lessons that have come along with that. Probably the biggest learning curve were the different modes. So right off the bat, you have rally mode, you've got road mode, rain mode, off-road mode. Each of these is going to change your ABS and your manual traction control settings. What I learned right off the bat is that if you're trying to do wheelies in road mode, switch to rally mode, then what ends up happening is a gross over-throttling of the vehicle. So I had the bike for like 2 hours. I've been riding on the trails in off-road or road mode, kind of switching back and forth, and I was having a blast. I thought that off-road mode was excellent for getting my feet underneath me and really not feeling like the bike was going to get a little too aggressive in the corners or in the straights or anything like that, or even in the braking. It was a really good training wheels mode, but also I could find myself riding that if I'm tired in the day and I just want to put miles on. I don't want to have every neuron in my brain thinking about what I'm doing with my clutch and throttle. Now, if that is the mode that you want to be in, then rally mode is exactly that. So I switched the bike to rally mode and was doing the same exact maneuvers, practicing wheelies, except with a very different throttle response, and found myself, before I knew it, with my butt on the ground and a bruised tailbone and bruised ego. So it was exactly what I think had happened to the prior owner. There were some scratches on the bike that had maybe had led me to believe that, but turns out that it's a big deal. So there's a little bit of a learning curve on this bike. It is not a BMW GS. It is not for general touring. This is meant to be an all-out aggressive dirt bike, and it fulfills that role wholeheartedly. So the number one learning curve so far has been just figuring out your modes and making sure that you're in them when you're switching from gravel to road to gravel to road. I've been on the road where I wished I had ABS braking that I didn't have, and I wished I was in off-road mode or rally mode when I was really in road because I had just gotten off the path. And so that's happened multiple times. You just got to be careful that you're aware of that. The good news is with the KTM 790, you can actually flip these on the fly. You can set a couple favorites, and it's pretty easy. Even though it resets itself every time you turn it off, it's very easy to just switch through these modes, and it does leave you in the screen that would allow you to control those, or within a click or two. So it's really not been a big deal. So now that we've gone through that, let's go ahead through some of the accessories that I got. We'll go down kind of chronological order from what I felt was needed right off the bat to some of the things in the farkle that I put on later on down the road. All right, so right off the bat, I'm a tall rider. I'm 6'5", 225. So if there's any question in the shocks, And the springs, I actually have felt that the stock spring has been just fine on the front and backs. I haven't gone to a stiffer spring, but we'll get into the suspension a little bit later because it has given me some fits. So the first thing that I noticed on the bike was that with the stock windscreen, and I have the Adventure R, so with the stock windscreen, I was getting quite a lot of buffeting over my head, or kind of right in the nose. I felt like the wind bubble at the highest setting would kind of hit me right in the nose, and so this whole area has given me quite a bit of buffeting. Coming from a bike that didn't do that, it's always a bummer. That being said, earplugs make a big difference if you still want to stick with a stock one. But overall, I ended up getting a small wind fairing across the upper part of that. I love it. It's great. I still have some buffeting, but it's tolerable. I've been riding this way for the last year and a half. That's the way it's going to stay for me. But I put cruise control, heated grips, and then also for being a tall rider, in the tallest setting that I could get the handlebars, I was still not super happy with the height. I could use like an extra inch. And so what I ended up doing is going with a Scotty mount sub-bar or sub-mount steering dampener, as well as some Renthal FatBars. Really happy with that setup. It brings it up just enough for me that it's in the right place. I don't feel like I'm leaning forward on my hands anymore. And for somebody that's gotten 2 broken wrists in the past and has significant wrist issues from BMX riding and things like that, it was really nice to get that pressure off my arms. So very happy with that. So another thing I did was I added on a Black Dog Cycle Works skid plate. It went on very easily. It's been great for protection. I can put a jack stand right underneath it. So for all those reasons, really happy with that. The next thing I did was I added a Seat Concept seat to it. It's their tall, kind of aggressive riding seat. I don't have the name of it. The one thing I will say is that the material I got was like, it was designed specifically to not be super hot when you get a lot of sun. I live in Florida now. The black seat gets super hot, and I think it's Dyneema or something like that. I'm probably killing it. Diamond something. Anyway, if you go to the Seat Concepts website, it's a great seat. The only thing I'll say is if I'm not wearing riding pads because I'm riding on the street and I'm just wearing some jeans, that the hard kind of 90-degree U-shape, it's kind of like this that you're sitting on, those edges, when they really rub into your inner thighs, and I caught that right away. So I'm not super happy with that. I do switch back to my other seat if I'm just cruising, but it's been great for off-road so far. I'll talk about it more, I'm sure, in future videos. So the last thing that I felt was almost a necessity was the one-finger clutch by Camel ADV. I put that on there. It made a big difference. It's cool that you have some adjustment in how that functions as a lever. It's got 3 different pinholes. Super cool piece of kit. Super cheap for what it does, and I've had no problem with my clutch since. I will say though, with big hands, if you're using the stock clutch control lever, or even if I have an aftermarket lever on my bike now, in both instances, when I pull or actuate the clutch, I actually have the bar hit me right here in the finger, and that's been really annoying because I'm constantly, you just feel that pressure as you're squeezing the bike handle. It's hitting you right there. So if I did something different, I would take my stock KTM shift lever and brake lever, and I'd cut those down to mini stubby levers and then just put like a rounded boot on the end. I think that would definitely solve it, and I'd probably be a lot happier. Also, it keeps the rest of my fingers off of the levers and around the grip, because that's important. So you can, Rottweiler and Camel ADV and some of the other brands have done an excellent job of creating accessories for the KTM 790. I will say though, in some instances, you're definitely paying an arm and a leg for a simple product. $80 for a little piece of aluminum. So, if you're a frugal buyer and you are looking for a way to accessorize your bike for a little bit cheaper, my biggest tip is going to be heading to Alibaba. It's something that I did with fingers crossed initially. I didn't know what kind of parts I'd be able to scoop up from there, but my overall intentions and thoughts were that, hey, most of these parts are stamped metal. I'm getting charged an arm and a leg otherwise, and I can get, for the cost of 1 or 2 of those accessories, I can get just about everything that they make for KTM accessories from Alibaba. So I did it with low hopes, not really sure how things were going to go, but it turns out that I was very happy with what came in the mail. I had to do very little modification of the pieces. Most of it, as I said, stamped metal, very simplistic, and I was overall very happy. Now, I didn't use this for things like the clutch control lever. I did buy that from Rottweiler. Any electronics, things like that, more complex pieces. All of that stuff I went through name brand. But when it came to the stamped aluminum parts that were for protection, so I highly recommend before you go out and spend $500, $600, $700 accessorizing your bike, that maybe you go to Alibaba, see what you can get there, and then the more important, higher spec items, maybe you go ahead and get those from the manufacturers that are out there in America. So that would be Rottweiler, Camel ADV, just to name a few. I've had excellent experience with them. I'm sorry if you guys are watching this video that I just let the cat out of the bag, that there are some other options out there, but thank you so much for the products that you did design, and I am a loyal customer. I just decided that for a piece of stamped metal, I wasn't going to spend $100. So the last thing that I ended up doing on the bike was I added stickers. So if there was one thing that I could change about the KTM 790 right off the lot, it would probably be the Karoo 3 tires. Now, saying that, I do have 5,000 miles on mine. It's not like I immediately went and replaced them. But in having them for 5,000 miles, they have let me down in certain instances. I've had several instances with absolute zero traction. In all fairness, I walked over the same sections in my riding boots and could pretty much figure skate across the road. That being said, I would expect to have a little bit higher traction on the rubber for basic road needs, especially in the rain. So the Karoos didn't do great on that. I think that there is a compromise there, but they also weren't that great off-road. The bike rides very loose underfoot and doesn't corner well for what you would expect out of this bike. I think that you've got a really, really incredible suspension and a really incredible powertrain on the bike, but then it's catered with some really cheap sneakers. So if you were to put maybe an 80-20, and this also depends on how you're riding. If you're riding on the road, get an 80-20 road tire, and if you're riding off-road, then maybe flip-flop that. Like some Battle Racks, whatever they're called. Something that's more of a knobby tire. I think that if you had a knobby tire on there, and I'm just about to switch before our next trip, I think that I'm going to have much improved performance pretty much across the board. But the one thing I will say about the Karoos is that, they lasted 5,000 miles. Now, the first 1,000 miles or 1,500 miles of riding was mostly off-road, and then I rode in Chicago while I was there for a year. So it was all on-road, almost no off-road, and then several trips recently, another couple thousand miles off-road. They've been great. They've really been okay, but if I could do it over again, I would have much rather put 2 sets of tires on and not had instances where I laid down the bike. So I guess overall I would have definitely replaced the tires sooner if I could do it again. So because within the first couple hours of owning the bike, I knocked the taillight out, I did have to replace the taillight, and in the time that I was doing that, decided to do some other modifications. What I ended up choosing was a Rottweiler tail delete, which gets rid of the blinkers and a lot of the plastic back there and replaces it with a license plate cover that has lighting around the outside that's very bright. I've liked it so far. I've heard that it's tough to see the blinkers, but I've also heard that it's exceptionally bright for the brake light, and so I much prefer that to make sure that people can see me and avoid me when I am braking. Beyond that, I put a steel plate on the top of that, or I guess it would be an aluminum plate. I'm not sure because it's powder coated, but it's made by Perun. It's a European company, and that plate just sits on the back and it acts as a luggage mounting rack. And then from there, I added a Pelican case, or in this case, an off-brand one from Harbor Freight. Put a couple wing nuts through it, and very quickly had a very secure top box that you could only take apart from the inside. And that way you could lock it, and that's been on the bike since I built it, and very happy with that. Something that I almost forget is there now are the set of extra large pegs that I had put on. They're a stainless steel peg. I got them from a guy in Europe. He does custom manufacturing of the pegs, so I couldn't even tell you. There's some guy on Facebook. But I had the pegs set down 20 millimeters and back 10. just because I've got a larger boot size, and any way I can stretch myself out on the bike vertically is good. So lowering those foot pegs a little bit was nice. But most off, the pegs are just massive, and that adds a big difference from the stock pegs. I feel very secure standing, and that's how I prefer to ride the bike almost all the time, even on the street too. So it's nice to have those big pegs that you can just lock your boots into. That said, if you try to ride with the pegs and you've got shorts or even jeans on, the pegs are very sharp, so you do feel it in the calves. Every once in a while you'll get bit by the peg unintentionally. So I've also added a set of bags to the 790. I ended up going with the Giant Loop set, which is not as popular as some other brands, but still has an incredible reputation. And in this case, I'm very happy. I ended up putting two big panniers with 40 liters on each side in the back. They've got dry bags that go inside them, so it's really nice to be able to take your gear, just slip it right out of the panniers, leave the bags attached. I've also put a tank bag and front fork panniers on the bike, and between all of that, I've got excellent storage. Probably have 80 plus liters, plus the top box, and I can also put a duffel across the pannier soft bags in the back seat, right where the passenger would go. So I have flexible storage. I could probably do 200 plus liters of storage if I really wanted, which is way more than I would ever plan to have. So I've only had the soft bags on for one trip, and on that trip I ended up falling and sliding out. It wasn't a bad crash. It was just a 30-mile-an-hour slippery conditions kind of crash and an S-turn. But the bags did get abused a little bit, and they handled very well for the abuse that I provided to them. Still intact, and once I get a chance to use them a little bit more, I'll write a thorough review on the entire system that I decided on using. So to summarize my overall experience with my KTM 790, it's been absolute bliss overall, but there are still some questions of dependability that I think need to be addressed. It seemed like my model, being a 2019, the first model year, certainly had some issues to it. I brought the bike back 2 or 3 times for different recall events, and on top of that, I had a rear shock failure at 4,500 miles. Now, my overall experience with the dealership hasn't been great. Just because I didn't buy the bike from my dealer initially, I think that they were honestly a little bit butthurt by it, because every time I came in, they just kind of gave me a hard time about it, and they were really reluctant to do any work on the bike or work with me on anything. So anytime I needed to bring the bike in for an update, or if I wanted to get the cruise control updated onto the bike, which after I installed it, I needed to bring it back to a KTM dealer for them to put in some sort of a computerized update, even though I had purchased it online, or actually the prior owner had purchased it. So that was kind of a pain, because they wanted to charge me for that and ended up not charging me, but initially it was frustrating and they really wanted to fight it. Secondarily, once I brought the bike back for its rear shock failure, none of the dealerships wanted to touch it. It was just out of warranty, but at 4,500 miles, it's nothing for a rear shock. There's no reason it should have been leaking out. And I think that overall they knew that. Thank goodness for advrider.com. I was able to find somebody on there that would recommend going to the WP dealers, which are not all KTM dealers. All WP dealers, I believe, sell KTM, but not all KTM dealers are WP dealers. So the WP is a shock brand for that particular bike, and when I brought it to one of their dealerships on the other side of Florida, they actually took it in and did all the warranty work and sent it back to me, all under warranty, even though it was out of warranty. And I think that was just particularly because this is a premature shock failure, which has been documented on several KTMs on the forums before. And so that just kind of, with that, it's just important to know that with the KTM 790, especially initially, that it seemed like it was released a little early, and there are still a couple things here and there that will have likely shown themselves by now on bike owners. So if you're buying one used, it's probably either going to happen by now or it's not, but just something to be aware of. That said, even with a shock failure, even with some talk of like premature clutch failures as well, even though that hasn't happened to me, I'd still take the 790 over anything else in that model year. although I am really jealous of the 890. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope that there was some information in this that was valuable to you. If it was, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.